Welcome to today's episode of the Right to Food debate. My name is Nixon Otieng, and together I'm joined with my panelists Nyabuto Nachio and Michael Lidambo. On our today's motion, it reads, this House believes that agriculture in Kenya fails due to insufficient funding from the government. I now wish to welcome our first proposer on stage to come and make your case.
So, I'd like us to note that agriculture is the backbone of our economy as Kenya. And insufficient funds, if we come here and tell you that the main reason why agriculture is failing is due to insufficient funds, we are trying to tell you that the funds being supplied by the government is not matching the amount of impact agriculture could have to our nation. Let's look at it in this aspect. Our population is ever growing. So likewise, the funds are supposed to be growing together with the population. Since with growth of population, we have increased needs, we have increased demand. So the funds should be doing the same with the people. We might have other problems, yes, but if funds are not there, and these little funds are then misused by the government, this will be a terrible disaster to our country. Also, agriculture and economic experts have noted that it may be difficult to achieve food security priority in our Big Four agenda with the underfunding of this sector. It's really sad to have this as among our Big Four agendas, yet it's given something so little as 2.8% of our total funds as a country. Let's go back in history. Back in the 80s, Kenya had a small population. We all know that. And the funds back then was about 11% allocated to agriculture. But we see as we grew towards 2020, the funds have been growing ever smaller. For example, in 2001, we had the funds at 3%. This is imposing a big luggage to the agricultural sector. How so? If I have, for example, 3 children in my house, I'll be working to have everyone with 3 plates, each one of them. But if I give birth to 3 more children, I'll be working to have 6 plates. That is to satisfy everyone. So if at all my children decide to break their plates or throw them away, I will have fulfilled my role as the parent. So if the government is going to be decreasing these funds as we grow as a population, this is going to be going against all the policies we've set in place. And it's worth noting also that our country is very good at coming up with these policies and also setting them in place. The problem comes in when we have to get these funds and implement these policies. In the previous years, we have seen that agriculture has been allocated slightly above 3.5% and 6.5%. And the biggest percentage in our country is consistent of farmers and people who benefit from these agricultural activities. We have markets everywhere. We have everyone needing food to eat. So if the money is not going to be enough to get that food from the ground, it's not going to satisfy everyone across the country. We have problems like desertification, climate change, name it. Those ones are going to be dealt with after we've allocated enough money to bring up these agricultural products. So after we have enough money to make everything pretty around our agricultural field, we will see to it that we'll add an extra amount of cash to deal with other problems. Kenya is not the only country facing problems like desertification and poor soil. There are many more countries. It's a global problem. But if Kenya is going to be the only country giving out very little insultive funds to this big sector, it's going to be a disaster to our country. Also, I'd like to quote something from Dr. Alex Awiti, the director of East African Institute, Aga Khan University. He says that the budgetary allocation makes the quest to food security a pipe dream unless necessary incentives and policy intervention are urgently put in place. So if the government is not going to stand up and deal with this alarm of tiny funding, this was going to be a disaster by the end of the day. Also, we have the problem of funding our extension services. If the government wants to get to that farmer, that illiterate farmer down there, they have to go through a certain person or a certain board or a certain channel. So if we don't have the funds to pay this channel to go smoothly, we won't get to that farmer. And in turn, you're going to get an ugly result as the government. And the blame is not taken by the farmers. It's taken by the whole country. It spoils our name since agriculture is the backbone of our country. So as the government, we might have a lot of problems, natural or human-made, but we have to work on funding our agricultural sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our first proposer. I now wish to welcome our first opposer to come and make your case.
First of all, I have noted that our government has agreed that there is misuse of funds in the agricultural sector. Then if they have agreed that indeed there is misuse of funds, why should we give them more funds if they cannot already manage the little funds, the funds that have been allocated to them? I will go on to build our case, which is agriculture does not fail due to insufficient funding. Kenya's agricultural sector has been a mixed bag of boom and decline since independence, and insufficient funding is not the major cause of the decline. So there is factors such as poor policy planning and legislations. The government said that there is policies, but I'd like to tell them that poor marketing policies are making the farmers, the brokers gain more at the expense of the farmers. The farmers are losing more. This is frustrating to the farmers because you cannot be putting this input in your farm, but then people are buying your crop at a throwaway price. This is what is frustrating the farmers. Thus, the government should focus more on regulating the sector, looking at the private and the public sector, how they are buying from the farmers to avoid the exploitations of the farmers, because it's really frustrating them. And then there's need for extension support from the government, issues of soil testing, knowing which type of crop should be grown in which area. Okay, the policy put in place, and there's enough funds to actually make sure that these policies are implemented. It is just upon the government to check and to ensure that these people are indeed doing that which is already put in paper.
Do you think it's justice if the backbone of our country, agriculture, is given the least percentage of our funding?
Let me tell you, agriculture in itself, we cannot say that agriculture, we cannot allocate too much funds for agriculture because there is interdependence in these economies. Okay, there's interdependence. You need the transport sector, the health sector. Right now, there's issues of COVID-19 and everything. A sick nation cannot work. Therefore, we cannot alone just put all the funds in the agricultural sector. There's a lot of interdependence that goes on, and that is one thing that the government needs to understand. Okay, I'll go on. The other issue is institutional structures. As we said, the institutional structures that are there, they are failing because of mismanagement. Because of mismanagement, you find that cooperative societies, they are being disbanded. The cooperative societies are not working well because there is mismanagement of the people at the top. What the government should be doing, instead of complaining that these funds are little, yes, there is these funds, but these people are not using the funds appropriately. The mismanagement is what is causing these cooperatives. I'll take your POA in a few. It's what is causing these cooperatives not to function as they should. The other issue is climate change. That is a global issue affecting the agricultural sector. Actually, it's out of control it's out of our control. It's an act of God. Pests and diseases is an act of God that we cannot be able to control. Thus, what the government should do is embark on more sustainable farming. What am I talking? Organic farming, preservation of seeds, because it's cheaper and it's going to save more. For the points that are remaining, I'll call upon my colleague to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our first proposer. I now wish to welcome our second proposer to come and make your case.
Members of the third estate, for starters, let's settle this in a statement. Most important contribution in the Kenya's economy is done by agriculture. Why is this so? 25% of the GDP is from agriculture. Number two, 65% of the Kenyan exports come from agriculture. Number three, 18% of the people employed in Kenya come from agriculture, which is the formal employment. And to in that, taking that into consideration, the government only budgets 2.8% of the total budget to agriculture. Taking this into consideration, agriculture is the main economic activity in the country, and yet the government can dare to budget only 2.8% of the entire budget to agriculture. Peanuts. Number two, the government can dare tell us that agriculture is part of their Big Four agenda, among others, and yet they budget only 2.8% of the same to agriculture, and yet they call it the Big Four agenda. How? Number three, the government, the Kenyan government in 2003, what my partner said, they made a commitment to the AU Maputo Declaration, where they made a commitment to contribute to budget 10%, yearly budget, 10% should go to agriculture. And yet since 2003, the Kenyan budget for agriculture has never surpassed 5%. It has been lying about 3.5%. Last year it was 2.9%, and this year is 2.8%. Is this serious? Peanuts. In summary, what my partner and I are trying to say in today's motion is that the government recently announced measures under the Big Four agenda towards boosting the country's food security by heavily investing in agriculture. But analysts note that its financial commitment in the recently announced and past announced budgets remain too little to deliver the promise. Number two, a lot of the money in the current in the current budget, for instance, has been directed to fund research. Yet extension services, which are very critical in linking farmers with the research, has been forgotten. This was what my partner was trying to say, and opposition was trying to twist it. So this is what am I trying to say is that the 2.8% that is budgeted by the government, instead of it going to fund the projects to help the farmers, 80% of the small scale farmers, most of the budget goes to funding research, of which this research does not reach the small scale farmers down there. There is no extension services to provide what the research has found and the findings of the research, or to support the findings of the research to be practiced by the small scale farmers. So there is no extension services to support the research and to support the farmers to do what the research has found. Why is this so? Because there is minimal allocation of funds. There is no funds. There are no funds to support this. Recently, when Governor Waititu was being impeached, the MCAs there were crying because the MCAs, a certain ward in Kiambu, the MCAs were crying that they don't know, they even don't know their extension officers, and yet the government has allocated funds to mitigate the same, and when the Minister of Agriculture was asked why the extension officers were not doing their work, the Department of Agriculture stated that there are no enough funds to mitigate and to curb the cost, to cover the cost of having extension officers in every ward. This in turn affects the performance of these small scale farmers who contribute to 80% of the produce that comes from agriculture. So I expect the opposition to come here and tell us excuses like other excuses like climate change, disease and pests, and other petty issues like soil nutrients. These issues can be solved if the government provides provide funds to these extension officers who can extend the research that have been done by these research institutes like CARI and other research institutes. They can provide these extension services to the small scale farmers. If there's enough funds to support these extension officers and to support these extension services, we can be able to ensure food security in this country. So the matter at hand is funding. The most important factor in this debate is the funding, because without funding we cannot have extension officers. We cannot have these extension officers performing their duties to help the farmers. So in summary, what the real problem we have at hand in Kenya is that we do not have sufficient funds to fund these extension services and the extension officers to do their jobs. It is not about policies. There are policies down in paper. Kenya is known for having good policies down in paper and having mediocre practice in the field. So the main problem is having funds to fund these extension officers and the extension services, and not anything else. And with that, I like to rest my case.
Thank you very much to our second proposer. I now wish to welcome our second opposer to come and make your case.
My name is Lydia Wambui, and I'm very disappointed because I think the able government didn't do the motion justice that it deserved, and we ought to address this issue with urgency and emergency that it deserves. For example, they told us that actually we have funds and we actually have extension officers, and they went ahead and told us that we should have these funds increased. They didn't tell us why we should have these funds increased. Well, and the last speaker of my able government said that the policy that we have policies in Kenya and the legislation is good. My question is, do you know that there is a policy pending on the use of toxic pesticides in the parliament as we speak right now? Why then is it pending if we have policies that are adequate? Okay, our case as the opposers is that the funds are actually sufficient, but what is grappling the sector is, number one, the good faith of the farmer, of the individual farmers. The farmers at the grassroots are continuing to subdivide the land, which at the end of the day is not agricultural or productive. The soil quality is decreasing day by day because these farmers, mind you, there are sufficient funds which are being mismanaged by the officials. For example, you told us that they are extension officers. Why shouldn't we blame it on the individual officers who are not working, and we are blaming it on the insufficient funds? Okay, I will go to my point. I will address my points in three tier. Number one is mismanagement of funds which are allocated, since they are enough. Tell me, explain to me like a toddler how 52.8 billion is not sufficient for a single country. Tell me how that is not possible. And you went ahead to isolate Ministry of Agriculture with other ministries. Mind you, you say that we are supposed to be exporting we are supposed to be exporting these agricultural produce. How then are we going to do so if we are not going to allocate funds to the Ministry of Transport? How then are we going to do so if we are not going to allocate funds to the Ministry of, say, Energy, which will mitigate climate change? Then if you isolate Ministry of Agriculture, then it means you're not addressing the problem at the root cause. Okay, I'll explain my point in three tier as I have said. Number one, personal preferences of the farmers. There are sufficient funds, but farmers opt for other developmental activities since they don't have knowledge on farming. Therefore, they opt to go for that which, I'll take it shortly, they ought to go for that which is profitable. Therefore, they are not being educated by the same government which is saying there are no sufficient funds. There are actually sufficient funds. Mind you, the farmers, each and every season, because we depend on bimodal rains, each and every season, the cereal boards on the county level are given fertilizers and seeds for the farmers to plant. The farmers who go to take seeds there don't even have farms. Do you know that? The farmers who go for the fertilizer, they take the fertilizer and then sell. Then how are you telling me there are not sufficient funds? The problem is the farmer at the grassroots level who should be educated, because the funds are there. The funds are there are being mismanaged, number one. Number two, we don't have institutional framework. I'll take it shortly. Number two, we don't have institutional framework which is sufficient. For example, the institutional framework on sufficient funding means even the farmer, the grassroots, can be able to acquire a loan, maybe to purchase a machine or such, to be able to farm, in a modernized way. Therefore, if the farmer cannot be able to access loans because of the institutional defranchise, then you cannot tell me there are not sufficient funds. There are funds which are not being used properly by the people at the grassroots level. Okay, I'll go to my other point, which is very important, as my colleague said. I'll take it shortly. Climate change. Please help me understand. How is climate change associated with lack of sufficient funds? Climate change is a global issue, mind you, and climate change cannot be mitigated by use of funds. Climate change is mitigated by the goodwill of each and every citizen. I'll take it shortly. Goodwill of each and every citizenry. So if you're going to use, say, non-renewable energies, if you're going to use plastic bags, which will end up destroying the soil, it is not an issue of funds. I'll take it. What's up?
Will I be wrong to say that these farmers can be educated on how to tackle climate change if, by extension officers, if these extension officers are well funded?
Well, the institutional framework is defranchised, therefore they cannot be educated. Okay, and I'll show you the solution to the problems that you have, because we have agreed that you are grappling in the agricultural sector. I'll show you how this is the outcome of the plan that you have. I'll show you the legitimacy of the plan, and I'll show you how the utility of the plan. Our plan is fund all the sectors, synergy between all the sectors. Therefore, we will be able to address the problem at the root. Therefore, we cannot say we only fund the ministry and leave other institutions without the funding. Number two, we are also supposed, for example, the Galana Kulalu food security program, it was allocated 14 billion, and the Chinese people just left because the money was mismanaged. The money was there, but it was mismanaged. Therefore, the judiciary also should come in place to deal with those officers who are corrupt and those that are money greedies, and deal with them appropriately at the individual level. I'll rest my case.
The motion of the day seeks to ask the question: is funding from the government the root failure of agriculture? The proposition's case went as follows. They provided budgetary statistics as to how agriculture has been funded, as well as how agriculture is purely contributing into the country's GDP. In the extension, they furthered their case in trying to show how illiteracy and poor extension services had contributed towards low agricultural produce within the country. And last but not least, they were able to outline as to how increase in population was not really tallying with the amount of food or funding that was being given in the agricultural sector. The opposition's case, on the other hand, identified the following problems: funding, policies, failure in institution, personal preferences, climate, and other institutional framework as some of the bigger problems. The opposition's case was built on the fact that a lot of farmers have different personal preferences. There is also a lot of institutional framework that needs to be considered in terms of how export and import actually works, and other ministries that need to come together. They were also able to explain as to how climate change was able to affect different farmers across the country as far as farming is concerned, and that not only funding was the only problem that was being associated with agriculture. To further the extension, they provided a solution model as to how, once the government is able to fund all sectors across the board, including the judiciary and policy implementation and oversight committees and other necessary bodies, it would be able to give a solution to the agricultural problem. It is with this that the panel voted unanimously for team opposition, as they proved to have a clear outlined reason towards the cause of agricultural failure as a result of funding, moreover providing a better feasibility as to how the solution would work. Thank you very much for watching, and tune in for the next episode.